Hey everyone, my name is Austin. I'm a senior product designer here at GitLab working in the compliance group. For this week in my realm, I have a good bit of things that I wanted to cover, so I'm going to do it as swiftly as possible. So the first thing I want to share is I found out that the full project path being super long is very rare. So big shout out to, I think it was Paul who helped out with this. But we were trying to figure out essentially if we should use a multi-line like text area or a single line input when deleting a project. And the concern was that we would be having projects with really long namespaces attached to their project name, which might expand past our normal threshold for character limits in terms of being visible in the same space. Short answer is that's rare. At least in the data set that he pulled back, didn't even see any instances of it. So that's a promising sign and helpful for informing our design decisions. Next, I wanted to talk about the fact that I continue to see features being requested in the group level so they can be better administrated at the project level. This specific customer request came around topics, which are available for projects. So they wanted to essentially be able to use this to create metadata for their own dashboards and stuff. So they want to be able to put these topics on projects, but they're annoyed that they'd have to manage them in individual projects and want to be able to do it with the group. So what that means is we need workspaces. I really want to work with Nick Post on the settings portion of that. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges that come with going to that scale. So we'll see how we can make an impact there on the user's experience long term. I also wanted to highlight next that I'm seeing if we can get keys and tokens in as a focus for a redesign effort. So Jeremy is looking for 5 areas of the product in which they would consider doing a redesign of the UI. So some other designers are adding in some of their ideas. I would love to see it specifically for keys and tokens. I kind of started doing this several months ago and it just fell off my priority list. But where I was landing back then was a unified credentials page in which you find all of your different tokens and keys so that you could keep them together. That would also simplify our navigation. We wouldn't have as many items in the actual list of a profile. They would all be tucked under one, which might make that a little easier to find and make that search function a little more viable or more useful rather when you're on your personal preferences. Another thing that I found really interesting is that we might be deprecating the segmented control. What's interesting about this is we don't actually use this true segmented control component on the audit events page. We kind of mimic it with a button group. What's interesting about it is that Jeremy is saying that we should get rid of it in place of that using a button group. So even though we did recently restyle the segmented control, since it's a radio button group underneath the hood, I'm thinking we're going to probably end up landing somewhere with buttons themselves instead and defining a pattern. So we'll go back, refine that, and then we'll go back and update audit events if we need to. I got really great response from the UX Weekly that I shared out, creating consistent experience with alerts. So some things I want to highlight here. There's an effort for migrating all the components over from Haml. There are other ways that alerts are constructed. I do see it sometimes happen in Ruby or in other areas. Different file types that aren't necessarily Haml are also creating alerts, so those will have to be converted as well. But really what this epic is trying to do is look at some of the alerts that can run into each other, ones that could be displayed at the same time or have weird overlapping issues, or they're presented in a regular format. And I'm just trying to run through each one, is this really necessary? So I spent some time today actually going through 4 or 5 of these and kind of helping flush out some of the ideas that I just had at the top of my mind and seeing if there's some other ways that we could better present this information. I'm just going to call out one as an example. So with the SSH key missing, we use a global alert that's not properly formatted as a global alert. So option 1 would be go through the refactoring effort, turn this into a proper global alert that actually goes across the entire page, like our pajamas guideline says. But as an alternative, we could just stop presenting a global alert and make it a focused one. So we could tuck an alert section into the dropdown when you're going to clone. So actually tying in, like, when does it matter to you? It matters when you have an SSH key when you're trying to clone something. If you're trying to pull or push, that would definitely be a situation. So it's possible that could be maybe displayed better. Like maybe we even make that another to-do, potentially, some type of action item in there. I have that mapped out for a couple other ideas. Like I maybe highlighted this last week, but maybe it could be like that for personal access tokens or the other stuff as well that might expire. Those things that are globally affecting your experience in GitLab, maybe we can tie them more closely to their respective areas so that it's not just like 7 alerts stacking on each other potentially at the same time. And I also want to say, like, I took another stab at getting Danger Bot to incorporate UX into the roulette. And I'm getting a lot closer. I simplified the scope, so I want to keep this iteration smaller so that it's still viable and useful, but it reduces the impact and it doesn't have to be as robust. It can still function as a very useful contribution this way. So I had it working, but then I came to learn that there was a lot more other steps involved. So I'm still working on getting these other danger files updated, and then once we really get this one merged, then we'll be cooking. So that'll be really cool to see. So essentially, when you see a merge request come through with UX and community contribution, you see those 2 tags on there, you'll then see in the reviewer roulette the actual tag. So you can kind of see it's happening now, or it's picking up a different designer to review it. This will be fixed once we fix some of the metadata. And yeah, that will help kind of get more UX eyes on community contributions, potentially creating a nice call to action for our contributors. Cool, hanging in there. Here we go. Next thing. So we promoted the status check migration effort into an epic. I don't know what the best way to break this down is, so I've asked Ian to kind of give it a little check. I reviewed some of the other implementations, so like Load Performance did this. I think I talked about that a little bit last week. But I guess the way I was imagining is like maybe each issue is one converts the loading state, one does the error state, one does the passing state, one does the sub states, the drop down options. I don't know. I'm not the front engineer, so I definitely don't know what the best way is to break it up. That's kind of how I was imagining in my head. I don't imagine this bottom piece is going to be built yet because we don't have the ability to show failed status checks yet, and we don't have the ability to show a non-blocking version of that. So we won't get there, but when I initially came up with these designs, I didn't know what point we were going to be at when we were ready to migrate the component. And next, eventually users will probably have the ability to turn off audit events, and this is going to be for a lot of the different features that you see in visibility settings under like the project general visibility. And what I was thinking as a dependency to do this is we would definitely want to capture an audit event. This is a very meta example. We want to capture an audit event of audit events being disabled or re-enabled so that we would know if there are any bad actors trying to turn off audit events, do something, or circumvent some process and then turn them back on. Because I'm assuming what would happen if the feature is disabled is that we would stop logging those events. And so if we're not logging the events, then we don't know what's happening. And we definitely want to make that clear to users what the implications of that are. So that's just going to be coming down the pipe maybe as we're trying to provide more flexibility into the users long term. Tori's been doing some really awesome videos on posting them on Unfiltered about navigation, the changes that we're making to it, the ways that we're going to try and make it more flexible for users, and hopefully make some good progress with the Foundations group. Whew, all right, that was a lot. If you made it to the end, let me know, and I'll send you a coffee chat.